Hello everyone and welcome to the Red Channel for a new video. Lately you've been bombarding us with questions. You want to know everything about her. Well, the engine has arrived, 946 cubic centimeters, the platform is here, and the electronics have been updated. Let me introduce you to the new CFMoto 1000 MTX. Before diving into the story of the MTX 1000, it's important to distinguish it from its little sister with an 800cc engine. First of all, let's talk about the chassis. It comes with Kayaba suspension, a fully adjustable 48mm fork and 230mm of travel. Same goes for the rear. No progressive linkage, a multi-adjustable monoshock with 230mm of travel. And then the braking system, here too we say goodbye to J1, the same brand used on the 800, to make way for Brembo M4.32 monoblock radial calipers and dedicated Pirelli Scorpion Rally STR tyres. We're about to start the test, but I want to take this opportunity to ask you a question. In your opinion, what are the direct competitors and why? Write it down below in the comments and I'll give you one last piece of information. The list price is $10,490 dealer price. But only in June, there's a super promotional price of $9,990.
There are many important changes regarding the chassis, starting with the high-quality suspension that adds value to a bike already targeted by many who want to experience adventure riding while keeping an eye on their budget. The psychological threshold of 10,000 euros definitely raises more than a few eyebrows. So the suspension department is of a high level paired with the same frame as the 800. It's no coincidence that the two technical specifications are perfectly overlapping except for the seat height, now at 870mm, 4 centimeters higher than the 800, and the declared dry weight of 206 kilograms, which is 1 kilogram more. The rest remains identical, including the 22.5-liter fuel tank with an average fuel consumption that is practically the same.
CFMoto 1000 MTX. I'll start first of all with the riding position, 870mm from the ground. There isn't a version with lowered suspension, but there is the option of a lower seat. But let me show you, since I'm 1.78 meters tall, how my feet reach the ground. The tips of both feet touch the ground, which is a good sign when you start riding in traffic and later when you move off-road in the afternoon. The riding position is centered, I like it, and I find a lot of what worked well on the 800 here too. The central area, I'd say, has a narrow waist where the end of the tank connects to the seat, narrow enough to make it easy to reach the ground. From the point of view of the rider triangle, I feel very comfortable there as well. I like the distance between the handlebars, seat and foot pegs, nicely centered. Maybe the knee angle is a bit tight, but in terms of comfort, for the first 50 kilometers we've ridden so far, there's been no discomfort at all. On the contrary, it's very, very comfortable, and the same goes for the seat. Soft but not too yielding, which I imagine can be very comfortable when you're connecting sections, especially during adventuring when you have to ride a bit on asphalt. The handlebar too, it's the right width, comfortable, I feel very good with it. In short, I find myself in a riding position that I already knew, but it's confirmed to be perfectly balanced. From a chassis perspective, as I mentioned at the beginning, there's a 48mm Kayaba fork with 230mm of travel, and the rear has 230mm of travel as well. Both components are adjustable, which means you can really customize them exactly as you want from this point of view too. How do the Kayaba fork and Kayaba monoshock perform in a direct comparison with the 800 sister model, which had no brand suspension components? The work here is truly of a high standard. Very little load transfer during acceleration and braking, which also means good control when you want to trail brake into a corner. So there's good support and more than decent response, especially from the monoshock, which reacts quickly when dealing with those so-called high-speed bumps. The small obstacles that usually cause the most discomfort to your back and seat when riding solo, and even more so with a passenger. I'll also talk directly about the brakes. I'd like to remind you that both levers on the handlebar are adjustable just like on the 800. The brake lever comes close enough, which I like. I'm always a bit sensitive to braking systems where the lever stays too far away. I prefer to have it a bit closer in. Here the fine adjustment is good. The braking system features 320mm Brembo discs and 4-piston monoblock calipers. As I mentioned at the beginning, the front brake performs very well. You can really brake with just one finger, and the fork does a great job of supporting and accompanying you. The front brake also behaves very well. Powerful, easy to modulate, just what you need for great performance on the road. The rear brake is a little less effective. The thought I had a moment ago is that this slight inefficiency of the rear brake might be related to the choice of tires, which are a bit more off-road oriented. What happens? Well, the response isn't overly aggressive. When you're going through a turn, you'd like to have a bit more bite, a bit more power, and when you ask for a little more, maybe as you enter the corner, the ABS kicks in, which is an issue with the rear knobby tire. From a dynamic point of view, for road use, I like the weight balance, which is helped, as I mentioned, by the behavior of the suspension. The bike weighs 206 kilograms dry. Let me remind you, that's 1 kilogram more than the 800, but it's agile, easy to lean into corners, quick in changes of direction, yet also pleasantly stable. So I imagine that with this bike, you're not thinking exclusively about off-road riding, despite the choice of a 21-inch front wheel and an 18-inch rear, but also about being able to travel comfortably with a passenger and really do everything without any problems.
The sun is in my eyes. The wind is in my hair.
Codename 292MX, 946 cubic centimeters, basically 113 horsepower at 8,500 RPM and 105 Newton meters of torque at 6,250 RPM. Parallel twin cylinder, a pride of CFMoto's production, with which I wouldn't be surprised if they equipped a maxi naked in the future as well. That said, important updates to the electronics have arrived to support the increase in power. The 6-axis IMU platform manages the cornering ABS, the ride-by-wire throttle, which has been updated in its operating logic, and the engine mappings have been revised. The 3 modes, road, rain, and off-road, the latter allowing you to deactivate the rear ABS, are joined by the confirmed presence of a slipper clutch and a gearbox equipped with quick shift both up and down. Additionally, there's a 4th mapping where you can truly deactivate everything and always feel both brakes in your hands.
Nothing's gonna stop it.
Engine topic: if the 800 was criticized for lacking a bit of liveliness, here there's plenty of it. I say this with a smile because you can feel every one of the 112.9 horsepower from the first to the last. Great work! A big step forward for this engine, which, as I mentioned earlier, reaches 946 cubic centimeters of displacement and is perfectly aligned with the 1000 MTX project. How does it work? I really have to compliment the electronics, and I'm referring to the connection between the throttle and the engine response. Very direct, with no filter, no annoying on-off effect. Especially in the standard mapping, you can really tell that a great job has been done, a good evolution. This has always been, in my opinion, an important issue to analyze when Chinese manufacturers arrived in Italy, as they were always a bit weak in terms of development. Let's say in testing, in the second phase after the initial design and production of the product. When it came time for that famous fine-tuning, refining the details, smoothing out imperfections, there used to be some problems. Today, with the latest electronics available, Bosch, by the way, for CFMoto, it's truly an excellent step forward. Engine delivery. It's great, really full even from low revs, smooth when coming out of corners with torque from 4,000 RPM upwards, and then an incredible push all the way past 9,500 RPM. It's hard to even want to reach the limiter because it really has such a strong thrust. You can feel some vibrations on the handlebar, especially on the right foot peg, but none on the seat, which confirms that overall there's still good riding comfort. What do I think could be improved in terms of power delivery? In the standard mappings, I'm referring to the full road mode, not the rain mode, which I'll talk about later. If you come out of a corner a bit below the torque curve with a slightly high gear, there's a bit of hesitation. But in my opinion, that's also due to the architecture of the front-mounted twin-cylinder engine, which obviously sacrifices a bit of low-end power. From the perspective of electronic management, I'm referring to the traction control. If we get a bit unruly, like in second gear with the bike leaned over a lot, or in third gear already giving it a good push, when the traction control kicks in on standard mode, it cuts in a bit too abruptly. You can really feel the saturation of the electronics more than the throttle closing, and then it takes about a second and a half to fully restore the power delivery. In the rain mapping mode, the power output also changes, settling at 80 horsepower. I'm also pleased to point out the behavior of the gearbox, the quick shifter, which, unlike the 800, is slightly less sensitive. If any of you have seen Stefano Cordara's video when he tested it, he mentioned that just a gentle touch on the gear lever was enough to shift gears, for better or worse. The gearbox, if you'll allow me the term, is typically KTM, extremely light in its action. Personally, I've never really liked this type of gearbox in general, but I do acknowledge its speed of operation and how lightly you can engage it. There's a slight notch when shifting up and a slight notch when shifting down. Extremely precise going up, very precise going down, with the possibility of keeping the throttle slightly open. So if by chance during a panic stop we grab the front brake lever and don't fully close the throttle, the downshifts still go in. And in the event of an emergency brake, the rear hazard lights automatically activate. Look, let me point out something very interesting. Thanks to the app, you can download on your smartphone, in this case also Apple CarPlay for connecting. And by the way, I'd like to remind you that the display is adjustable, confirming that when you're riding standing up, you can get a better view, or you can tilt it back down for road riding. You can create a custom map for yourself. You can't adjust the traction control or the ABS, those are fixed, but you can change and modify the torque delivery curve to have the one best suited to your own riding style. This point ties back to what I mentioned earlier, when sometimes in low revs and a high gear, you might want a bit more power. From the perspective of riding comfort, I should mention that today it's about 27 degrees and you can feel some heat coming from the engine under your thighs, but it's not excessively bothersome.
However, it's worth noting the limited wind protection, the wide turning radius, not an analytical figure but rather due to the fact that, often during U-turns, the fork hits the frame at full lock, making it necessary to complete the maneuver in 2 steps. However, I should mention that the windshield remains adjustable, there's cruise control, both the grips and the seat are heated, the instrumentation features a 7-inch vertical TFT touchscreen display that can be tilted, with updated graphics and direct connectivity to Apple CarPlay.
Maybe we should just rewind, leave my body numb. Maybe I was wrong to think that I was strong. Leave me just my pride. You can take the side, but no one else could ever see. No one else would ever see but you.
After all, if you choose a CFMoto 1000 MTX for adventuring, it has to be able to handle off-road as well. That's why we gave it a little taste of the forest today in a setting with hard, nicely compact, very dry terrain with grip that in some spots was even a bit low. I find a nice riding triangle when standing on the foot pegs. It really handles well. Shifting your weight within the rider motorcycle system is crucial because when you're standing nice and straight on the foot pegs with your arms wide, you realize there's a lot of support from the front end, but also a lot of mass up front, partly due to the low position fuel tank. In this case, we're at about 2/3 of the tank, maybe a bit less, so it's not completely full. It's a bike that needs to speak to you a bit. You need to get a little familiar with it, especially if you haven't used it every day, because to ride it well and dynamically in the right way, in certain situations, it's better to shift your weight back a bit to lighten the front end and not lose that sense of direction, since inevitably having more weight up front also means the steering tends to close. But the sensations are absolutely wonderful. Of course, I used the off-road mapping and I deactivated the ABS on the rear to have the control that's needed. I should mention that the ABS intervention on the front is good but very conservative. As a precaution, they decided to always keep it ready to intervene unless you choose to go to step 2.0, which means deactivating the front as well and being completely independent, just like real off-road riders do. That said, I have to say that overall, whether it's the balance, the behavior, or the front-end steering, the feeling is quite satisfying. The gear engagement also works very well, thanks in part to the quick shifter. So when you try to make more use of the torque rather than pure power, since otherwise you just end up digging into the ground for no reason, I liked it from this perspective as well. We've pretty much reached the end of this very first introduction, this 360-degree taste of the CFMoto world with the 1000 MTX. As I said at the beginning, you asked us for this. You were curious to know how it would perform, and I hope that, at least to some extent, I've answered your initial questions and the main curiosities that have arisen around this 1000 cubic centimeter maxi enduro. It's a wide open battle, The competition that CFMoto brings is obviously extremely fierce, so European manufacturers, Italian, German and others, need to start rolling up their sleeves and seriously consider what this new wave of highly successful products represents, with a foundation that we all know very well is likely the same one that will also equip the new KTM. To sum up, the engine has improved a lot. People liked its power delivery even at low revs. The electronics are great, very comprehensive in terms of throttle management, so a really good job. The gearbox is good too, so mechanically speaking, it's solid. The chassis with Kayaba suspension probably doesn't even need an introduction anymore, but in this context it shows that compared to the 800, there's a big difference. So we're really talking about two different worlds. The 800 is a bit more entry level, while the 1000 is already almost premium in this respect. What could be improved compared to what CFMoto has generally offered? As I was saying, perhaps the rear brake management could be improved a bit, and a little more torque at very low revs in higher gears would be nice. But if you feel like playing around with the mapping settings, you can do pretty much anything. Also, in terms of wind protection, even though the windshield is adjustable, maybe a small extra lip to direct the air over your head wouldn't be a bad idea at all. If you want to know more, if you're curious to have more information, or if you want to discuss the CF1000 MTX, I'm here for you. Right below, and I'll see you in the next red video. Bye.